I also acknowledge that we are here on stolen land, always was and always will be Aboriginal land. As the Greens, you might expect me to talk about climate change. I'm not going to talk about climate change because the Greens' climate policies are out there for everyone to see and has been my priority. I want to talk about income support. I want to talk about the fact that we are living in one of the wealthiest countries in the history of the world, and most of that wealth is gushing upwards at a great rate. We need to put a wealth tax in this country, tax corporations that aren't paying any tax, so that we can lift people in poverty out of poverty. The Greens are taking to this election a fantastic policy that I'm incredibly proud of for a living income guarantee, to lift all income support payments above the Henderson poverty line to $88 a day and keep them there, indexed to the Henderson poverty line, and to get rid of the conditionality and mutual obligations that make people's lives an absolute misery and make people have to jump through flaming hoops in order to get the scraps from the table. I'm incredibly proud that the Greens are putting that policy out there this election, funded through actually taxing wealth in this country. And I'll hand over to Tjanara to take the rest of the time.
Firstly, I'm a member of ACTCOSS as the Chair and National Convener of the Foundation for Indigenous Recovery and Development. I've been a member just this past year or so, so I'm on board with just about everything that we do in ACTCOSS. Talking about the Uluru Statement of the Heart, I have to say to Andrew that we are two parties who support the Uluru Statement of the Heart in its entirety, the ALP now as I understand it, and the Greens. So the Greens policy is Truth Treaty Voice. It's not in any order. It's actually a circle of interconnected relationship of Makarrata agreement making. People in the press have said many things about it that aren't correct. On the basis of self-determination and the UN rights of the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, we believe that sovereignty is the main issue that we should now be fighting for. Because since the 70s, we have had a number of voices to the ministers and the government, the NAC, the NACC, the ABC and ATSEC. All of these have been taken away from us. So we do not want a constitutionally recognised voice in the Australian Constitution for the very reason that that can happen again. What we are holding out for is sovereignty on the basis of the Truth and Justice Commission providing the parameters of a treaty. And in providing those parameters for the treaty, we can then strike a treaty which will include a voice to Parliament. And so all aspects of the Uluru Statement of the Heart will be covered. Much misinformation has been given about this by vested interest in the First Nations community, the media and the non-First Nations community about it. In fact, it was the NAIDOC thing that hierarchied voice, treaty, truth that occurred before the Uluru Statement of the Heart was struck at Uluru, and I was present. My cultural family come from Mutijulu, which is near Uluru, and they welcomed people to that place and to that environment and to that dialogue and to that discussion. There were a lot of people who walked out of the Uluru Statement of the Heart purely because sovereignty was not on the table. And I'm 63. I've been waiting all my life for sovereignty. The colonial government has no right to have stolen our sovereignty, and they have no right to say that only they will give it back. They must strike an equitable and equal treaty with us as sovereign nations of this country. That will right all the wrongs of the past. Ua Paria, thank you for having me.
Thanks so much to ACTCOSS for putting on this fantastic event. I echo Kim's point about what a wonderful community this is, and also about how I am somebody who's deeply, deeply committed to participatory politics, and these kinds of conversations I find energising and inspiring. Couple of observations. I heard such a diversity of views and so many different things that were being brought up. Necessary to think about drug law reform and criminal law reform and TAFE and refugees and childcare access and women's health and disability services. But there are a couple of kind of overarching things that I also heard quite a lot of. One is understanding the integration and the interconnection and the interdependence of all of these things, which of course is an approach that the Greens take to everything, understanding ecological interdependence and the fact that you push one thing over here and something happens over there. Also kind of overarching specific kind of policy approaches that came up a few times, one being the importance of a Human Rights Act or a Bill of Rights of some kind in this country, which would be so crucial to everything all of you and all of we are trying to do. One being really centering sovereignty and self-determination. And a final one being your sixth point for ACTCOSS being able to fund all of these services by taxing wealth in this country. Those kinds of overarching interconnecting issues, I think, came above everything that we heard, that if we can get some of those key settings in place, that we treat people with dignity and with basic human rights across our society, that we have the resources in this country, if we tax the enormous wealth in this country, to provide the services that everybody needs. We can do all of the wonderful things that you're all attempting to do. So thank you for everything you do.
Covered everything, Millie, that we spoke about at our table. I would add that we talked about women's health, which is particularly very important to me. Having lived in Canberra and worked in women's refuges and in women's health services in the 80s, I think it's really bad that those services have been, the funding has gone down significantly, so we cannot provide those services well enough. It seems like the NDIS was not planned well enough on the ground for it to really work over a long period of time. This is often one of the things in government. We make policy, we have great ideas, a government will do something because the community says they want it, and when they make the policy at a senior level and develop the legislation, as a senior public servant I've got to see how that's gone on for quite some time. And what happens on the ground is that then the program delivery does not necessarily reflect the vision of the policy. And I've always been the type of community development policy worker who tries to design a policy so that you can design the program in a way that enables the people on the ground to do it. I really have seen for a long time in the whole of Australia, it always kind of shocks me that the community sector is never funded enough. And yet it's the community sector that actually is taking care of the people when the Commonwealth should be providing the funding to the states and territories, just providing the funding generally for the community sector to do their good work. That has always shocked me, being a person from a community that is about caring, sharing and nuppagee, mutual reciprocity. I love this environment that we had today. I come from a culture where we sit in circles, we use Dadiri to listen deeply, and we try to take in everything that people are saying to us, not just mentally, but emotionally and spiritually. And so this was great. Arnie?
Can I just say one thing? I forgot to ask you, the candidates, Medicare. Can someone please bring up the subject about having dental?
Yeah, we talked about that. On our table after you went, Arnie, the next group, we talked about free dental and free mental health service into Medicare, because that's something that is just an injustice. It should be in there. Thank you, Panya.